So now we're going to look at the respiratory central pattern generator, right? So we talked about this before. Its main function is to generate this, it's the pacemaker for respiration, right? It creates this own rhythmic breathing, rhythmic ventilation that takes place. And the majority of the region where it's located is specifically in the pons and the medulla oblongata, right? This is where we have our respiratory pattern generator. And so what the point of this lecture is to basically show you what regulates it, what inhibits it, and what stimulates this phenomena. So in pink, we're going to do the inhibitors, right? So what can inhibit it? So we can even put a little negative sign here, right? So what inhibits this central pattern respiration, for example, have these little mechanoreceptors. So the central pattern generator is regulated via mechanoreceptors or certain chemoreceptors, specifically chemoreceptors that are selective for pH or carbon dioxide, right? So the central pattern generator is inhibited by these stretch receptors in the lungs, right? And it makes sense too, because if the lungs are expanding and contracting, there needs to be some kind of regulations. And so these stretch receptors help to tell the brain, okay, you need to stop breathing, right? Or else if this inhibition wasn't taking place, the lungs would keep on expanding and could possibly rupture, right? So you have these receptors here, right? So inhibition also, for example, from irritants, right? So when you begin to cough, because some kind of debris or some kind of food that went down your throat, right? And if you continuously begin to breathe, right, what would happen? This irritant would go down farther and farther, and it gives you a lot of other problems, right? So your breathing slows down whenever you have some kind of irritant in order to expel whatever is stuck in your lungs. So you begin to cough, right? And when you cough, you're not really ventilating, right? Or else that would give some kind of problem. So there's an inhibition there. All right. So what else do we have? We have these chemoreceptors. We have peripheral and we have central. So in, let's see, white, so we'll even do the normal arrow. You have these peripheral chemoreceptors. So these receptors are located usually on your aortic arch, okay, or for example, in other parts of your vascular system, but specifically in your aortic arch. And here, they're stimulated via increased concentration or partial pressure of carbon dioxide or a decrease in pH. So you have a high concentration of these hydrogens, right? So your body becomes very acidic. So in order to compensate for this increased acidity, right, or increased partial pressure of CO2, you need to increase the ventilation for allowing for everything to be expelled out, right? So you want more CO2. And so this peripheral chemoreceptor usually is located on a lot of your blood vessels. For example, here we talked about the aortic arch, so we can put that here, the aortic arch. Other type of chemoreceptors we have, for example, are in the central. Right, so we have the central chemoreceptors. And central chemoreceptors can be usually located in, for example, muscle tissues, any kind of systemic tissue. So these receptors, let me see, central chemoreceptors, So these can, for example, be located in the muscles, right? And again, same stimulus, right? So you have low pH or high partial pressure of CO2 leads to the increase in ventilation that takes place, right? What else do we have? Other kinds of receptors also, mechanical receptors, right? So we can put here, located in your muscles, right? When you begin to exercise. So when your muscles become hyperstimulated, right? So exercise, this can lead to an increase in stimulation of ventilation, right, in order to expel, right? So whenever you exercise, your muscles go through the process of cellular respiration or glycolysis, right? So you have either lactic acid buildup or a lot of partial pressure of CO2. And you want to get rid of this. So the way to get rid of this is to begin the respiration process in order to excrete all the CO2 out of the body, right? And then you have two other regions here that act both stimulatory. So I'm going to put this in blue. And I'm not going to put like a blank line or an arrow on it, so you know it's just that. So one is the higher brain. So the higher brain, right? And so the higher brain center located, right? So you have your cerebrum, you have your cerebrum, which again controls voluntary breathing, right? We can have voluntary breathing. Anything is controlled voluntarily. And also in another region here is your other receptors. For example, when we talked about, again, higher breathing specifically is the cerebrum. And when we look at other regions, again, part of still the brain is, for example, the limbic system. So the limbic system, right? And again, regulating emotions, right? So these are basically the general ideas of what causes it, right? So you have your negative inhibitors of breathing, right? So it slows down breathing. In pink, your stimulators of ventilation or breathing. In white, and then you have both taking place, the limbic system and the higher brain center that's taking place. So for example, we can talk here about the, what can we talk about? Amygdala, the hippocampus, right? These are all involved with the central pattern generator located in your respiratory system. Again, all of this is present in the pons and the medulla oblongata.